Everything you believe about the apocalypse is a lie. The word doesn't even mean end of the world. It means revelation, unveiling of your true divine identity. For centuries, they've manipulated these sacred texts to keep you in fear and spiritual submission, when in reality they contain the codes for your consciousness awakening. Jesus wasn't talking about external catastrophes, but about internal illumination processes that transform you from the inside out. Authentic spirituality was hijacked, and you were taught to seek external salvation when the kingdom of heaven has always been within you. Today I'm going to reveal the esoteric secrets that were hidden, showing how each symbol points to your divine nature and how different consciousness levels create completely distinct realities. Get ready to discover truths that can revolutionize your spiritual life. Imagine discovering that everything you learned about the end times was completely wrong. The word apocalypse doesn't mean destruction. Actually, its Greek origin apocalypsis reveals something much deeper and more transformative. We're talking about an unveiling, a revelation that happens not out there but inside yourself. This ancestral gnosis was purposely obscured, keeping millions of people trapped in cycles of fear and spiritual submission. The consciousness awakening that our ancestors encoded in this sacred text points to something extraordinary: your true cosmic identity. Authentic spirituality has always worked as a mirror, reflecting not future catastrophes, but infinite potentials present in every soul. When you understand that Jesus wasn't talking about external apocalyptic events, but about internal illumination processes, everything changes. Authentic spirituality has always been about recognizing that you're not just a human being having spiritual experiences, you're a spiritual being having human experiences. True mysticism teaches us that each person carries within themselves the potential for this transformative revelation. Think about it. How many times have you felt a subtle energy whispering that there's something greater waiting to be discovered? That sensation isn't coincidence. It's your inner being recognizing truths that were deliberately hidden. Every moment of deep contemplation is a practice of personal revelation happening. The manipulation of sacred texts happened systematically throughout the centuries. Masters of the occult always knew that keeping the masses focused on external catastrophes prevents them from looking within and discovering their own divine power. When you remain constantly worried about the end of the world, you don't have time or energy to work on your consciousness awakening. It's like keeping someone running in circles while the treasure is buried right under their feet. This strategy works perfectly for those who want to control, but fails miserably for those seeking spiritual liberation. True gnosis has always been available for those who had the courage to question dominant narratives. True revelation happens when you realize that your consciousness is the stage where all transformation occurs. It's not about waiting for something to happen in the external world. It's about allowing illumination to flourish in your inner world. For example, when you meditate deeply or have moments of silent contemplation, you're not just relaxing. You're practicing the same process that ancient mystics called personal apocalypse. Every insight, every moment of clarity, every time you transcend a mental limitation, that's revelation happening in real time. Gnosis isn't theory, it's living experience pulsing through your existence. Notice how your energy changes when you embrace this transformative perspective. What's really being revealed is your direct connection with the source of all that is. There's no intermediary, no spiritual hierarchy you need to climb. You're already a unique and perfect expression of the Creator. This understanding completely changes how you live, how you relate, and how you perceive each experience. The energy flowing through you is the same that moves galaxies and makes flowers bloom. When this truth becomes real in your experience, not just conceptual, you understand why so many systems tried to keep this hidden. Because an awakened humanity doesn't need external saviors. It recognizes its own inherent divinity. And this recognition opens doors to even deeper understandings about how different consciousness levels completely shape our experience of reality. Your reality isn't fixed. It's a direct reflection of the consciousness level you operate from. The same situation, the same event, can be experienced in completely opposite ways depending on the vibrational frequency your mind is tuned to. Those who remain trapped in fear states experience the world as a hostile and threatening place, where every shadow hides an imminent danger. But those who cultivate elevated levels of consciousness awakening see growth and transformation opportunities in every challenge. True spirituality teaches that you're not a victim of circumstances. You're a co-creator of reality through your internal state. This revolutionary gnosis changes everything when truly understood and applied. When Jesus spoke about having eyes to see and ears to hear, he was referring exactly to this expanded perception capacity that comes with progressive illumination. People operating on low frequencies interpret sacred symbols literally and externally, creating apocalyptic scenarios that generate even more fear and separation. For example, someone with contracted consciousness might look at a financial crisis and see only catastrophe, while an awakened person recognizes an invitation to reevaluate values and priorities. Mysticism teaches us that each experience carries multiple layers of meaning. Which layer you access depends entirely on your inner development. The energy you cultivate internally determines which version of reality manifests in your experience. What's fascinating is that this isn't just abstract philosophy. It's a universal law operating constantly. When you elevate your frequency through practices like meditation, contemplation, or energy work, you literally change the type of experiences you magnetize into your life. People with fear attract situations that confirm their fears, while those in states of love and expansion attract synchronicities and opportunities. It's like tuning into different radio stations. The programming you receive depends on the frequency chosen. Consciousness awakening allows you to become aware of this dynamic and take control of your existential remote control. It's not about denying challenges, but about transforming your relationship with them. Mass manipulation works precisely because most people don't understand this fundamental truth. By keeping entire populations in states of constant anxiety and worry, control, systems ensure these people continue creating and experiencing realities based on limitation and scarcity. When you awaken to the gnosis that your consciousness is the filter through which all experience is processed, you automatically free yourself from these traps. For example, two people can watch the same newscast. One will leave paralyzed by fear, another will use the information to make conscious and empowered decisions. The difference isn't in the external content, but in the level of internal spiritual development. The occult has always known that different dimensions of reality operate simultaneously, and your consciousness level determines which dimension you predominantly inhabit. Someone living in contracted states experiences dense three-dimensional reality, full of limitations and apparently unsolvable conflicts. But as you elevate through progressive illumination, you begin accessing more subtle layers where creative solutions and infinite possibilities naturally reveal themselves. Authentic spirituality isn't escapism. It's the recognition that you have access to resources and perspectives that transcend apparent problems. And this understanding prepares the ground for unveiling how sacred symbols themselves carry specific codes that activate different aspects of your expanded consciousness. Sacred symbols were never meant to be interpreted literally. They're sophisticated codes that activate specific aspects of your consciousness when decoded correctly. The mark of the beast isn't a physical chip or tattoo, it's the consciousness state where you're completely disconnected from your higher energy centers, operating only through the three lower chakras, focused on survival, power, and immediate gratification. When Jesus spoke about these mysteries, he was transmitting deep gnosis about the subtle anatomy of human beings and consciousness awakening processes. True mysticism has always used symbolic language because spiritual truths can't be completely captured by words. They need to be experienced internally. Each symbol is a key that opens specific doors of expanded perception. The 7 churches mentioned in Revelation correspond to the 7 alchemical stages of transmutation that your vital energy traverses during the illumination process. They're not physical buildings, but progressive states of spiritual refinement happening within your own temple, your energy body. For example, when you consciously work with practices that activate your heart center, you're literally crossing through one of these alchemical stages. Authentic spirituality has always been about this internal transformation, where base metals, dense consciousness states, are transmuted into spiritual gold, states of unity and compassion. Ancient occult masters encoded these instructions in symbols because they knew only those who developed certain spiritual maturity would be able to decipher them correctly. The four horsemen represent the different energetic emanations that your auric field can manifest, depending on the spiritual forces you choose to align with. They're not external entities riding through the physical world, but aspects of your own psyche that can be in harmony or conflict. When you cultivate thoughts of gratitude and compassion, your energy field emanates a luminous frequency that attracts positive experiences. But when you allow anger, envy, or fear to dominate your internal processes, your auric field becomes dense and attracts situations that reflect these contracted vibrations. Consciousness awakening allows you to become aware of these energetic patterns and deliberately choose which forces you want to amplify in your life experience. The animals mentioned in sacred texts function as archetypes representing different aspects of human nature, both in their primitive expression and in their transformed potency. The lion can symbolize both noble courage and destructive aggression, depending on the consciousness level through which this energy is expressed. When Jesus referred to being wise as serpents and gentle as doves, he was teaching about conscious integration of different archetypal qualities. True gnosis recognizes that you carry all these forces within yourself. The question is learning to direct them constructively. For example, sexual energy, traditionally symbolized by the serpent, can be expressed purely instinctively or transmuted into fuel for spiritual expansion. Literal interpretation of these symbols keeps people trapped in cycles of fear and passive expectation, waiting for external events to manifest. But when you understand that each symbol points to internal transformation processes, you recover your personal power and become an active participant in your spiritual evolution. Authentic mysticism has always been about this individual responsibility, recognizing that you're simultaneously the laboratory, the alchemist, and the substance being transmuted. The energy of illumination doesn't come from outside. It's activated through conscious work with these archetypal principles that are encoded in your own energetic structure. And this understanding reveals how what many interpret as divine judgment is actually a natural recalibration process that happens when you're ready to integrate higher consciousness levels. The concept of judgment has been completely distorted by conventional religious interpretations, transforming a natural consciousness awakening process into a source of terror and submission. Actually, judgment derives from a word meaning awakening. It's the moment when you literally wake up to who you really are beyond social masks and conditioning. There's no external judge evaluating your actions. There's only the pure energy of the source of all that is reflecting back to you, your own vibration without filters or distortions. Jesus taught about this process of total transparency where nothing can be hidden, neither from yourself nor from the universe. Authentic spirituality reveals that this judgment is actually a disguised blessing, an invitation to completely align your external personality with your internal divine essence. When texts speak about second coming, they're referring to the return of Christ consciousness in you, not an external figure descending from clouds, but your own Buddha nature blossoming through the veils of egoic identification. This process of remembering literally means reuniting fragmented parts of your consciousness that were dispersed through traumas, conditioning, and limiting identifications. For example, when you have a deep insight during meditation and suddenly understand a pattern you were unconsciously repeating, that's judgment awakening happening in real time. Mysticism teaches us that this process of progressive illumination is inevitable for every soul. The only variable is timing. Hidden Gnosis has always known that each person will eventually go through this total consciousness recalibration. The karmic aspect of judgment functions as an extremely compassionate and intelligent universal balancing mechanism. It's not punishment, but opportunity to integrate lessons your soul chose to learn in this incarnation. When you don't consciously process traumatic experiences or destructive patterns, the universe creates situations where these energies can be released and transmuted. For example, someone who always avoided confronting self-esteem issues might find themselves in situations that force this inner work. Consciousness awakening allows you to actively collaborate with this process instead of resisting it. Karmic energy isn't a debt to be paid, but a disguised gift offering healing and evolution. Each challenge carries within itself the seeds of your next spiritual expansion. The recalibration that happens during judgment, awakening, is fundamentally about vibrational alignment. Your personality, your beliefs, your emotional patterns, and your behaviors go through a refinement process until everything in you vibrates in harmony with your highest truth. It's like tuning a musical instrument. Each string aspect of your personality needs to be adjusted until your entire expression sounds in perfect harmony. Authentic spirituality recognizes this process as natural and necessary, not something to be feared. For example, when you feel internal resistance to choosing love instead of fear in a challenging situation, that tension is part of the recalibration process happening. Mysticism teaches that the more you consciously cooperate with this refinement, the smoother and more graceful the experience becomes. The final result of this judgment awakening is what texts call new earth and new heaven, a completely transformed perception of reality where you recognize the inherent sacredness in everything. It's not that the world changes, it's that you develop eyes to see the divine dimension that was always present. Gnosis reveals that this unified consciousness state already exists within you, waiting to be activated through sincere inner work. Illumination isn't a distant destination, but a gradual remembrance of your true nature. And as this remembrance deepens, you naturally begin questioning all structures and systems that were built to keep humanity forgetful of its inherent power, revealing even deeper layers of manipulation that need to be exposed and transcended. The greatest tragedy in human history wasn't a war or natural catastrophe, but the systematic hijacking of spiritual truths that could have liberated humanity millennia ago. The original teachings of Jesus, as well as those of other illuminated masters, were deliberately distorted to create control systems based on fear, guilt, and external dependency. Where there once existed direct gnosis about your divine nature, doctrines were implanted that make you feel unworthy and separated from the source of all that is. Consciousness awakening reveals how this manipulation worked through subtle but devastating alterations in sacred texts. Authentic spirituality has always been about individual empowerment and direct connection with the divine, concepts that threaten any hierarchical structure that depends on intermediaries to exist. The energy of truth is revolutionary because it liberates. When you study mysticism without the distorted lenses of organized religion, you discover that all great masters taught the same fundamental truth. You're an individualized expression of the Creator, having a temporary human experience to expand universal consciousness. This gnosis doesn't need temples, priests, or complex rituals. It flourishes naturally through silent contemplation and sincere inner work. For example, when Jesus said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," he was literally describing consciousness, states accessible through direct spiritual practices. But this simplicity empowered people too much, so it was transformed into something complex and inaccessible. The occult has always preserved these original truths, transmitting them secretly, through symbols and allegories, to protect them from institutional corruption. True illumination doesn't require intermediaries. It's an intimate process between you and your divine essence. Religious institutions systematically replaced direct experience with blind belief, transforming spiritual seekers into passive followers. Where original teachings spoke about developing your natural psychic abilities and telepathic connection with higher dimensions, prohibitions and fears about demonic forces were inserted. True spirituality celebrates your multidimensional nature and encourages exploration of expanded consciousness states. For example, The ability to receive insights through deep meditation was relabeled as temptation or illusion, keeping people dependent on external interpretations. Consciousness awakening restores your confidence in internal wisdom and the ability to discern truth through direct resonance. Authentic gnosis teaches that you have direct access to the same wisdom source that inspired all sacred texts, because that source is within you. Control through fear works by keeping people in contracted consciousness states where they feel small, unworthy, and dependent on external salvation. But when you understand that each challenge, each temptation, each moment of confusion is actually an opportunity to strengthen your connection with inner truth, the entire victim-savior paradigm dissolves. Fear energy loses power when you recognize you're here to expand consciousness through experience, not to be punished for imaginary transgressions. For example, feelings of spiritual guilt begin melting when you realize they're artificial constructs, implanted to keep you disconnected from your personal power. True mysticism teaches that you're eternally loved and accepted by the source of all that is, regardless of any specific behavior or belief. Recovery of your authentic spiritual heritage happens gradually as you question every concept that was programmed into your mind about religion, spirituality, and your relationship with the divine. Each dogma you transcend, each fear you dissolve, each moment of direct connection you experience, all of this rebuilds your confidence in internal wisdom. Illumination isn't about becoming something different. It's about removing conditioning layers that obscure who you always were. Consciousness awakening reveals that the spiritual search is actually spiritual remembrance. You're recovering knowledge and abilities that are naturally yours. Hidden gnosis confirms this is the era of collective awakening, where long-suppressed truths finally return to human consciousness. And you, by questioning, exploring, and directly experiencing these truths, become an active part of this spiritual revolution that's completely transforming our understanding of who we are and why we're here. Now that you've discovered these hidden truths, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Will you keep living as if you're separate from the divine source, or will you finally embrace your true spiritual heritage? The choice is yours, but understand this. Once you've seen behind the veil, there's no going back to unconscious living. Are you ready to start working with your energy centers instead of waiting for external salvation? Can you handle the responsibility of knowing you're a co-creator of your reality? This isn't just information. It's a call to revolution, a challenge to transform every aspect of your existence. The old paradigms are crumbling, and those who awaken first become the bridges for humanity's collective consciousness shift. Your spiritual evolution doesn't just affect you, it ripples out and influences everyone around you. So I'm asking you directly, are you going to be part of the